Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Hi, my name is Vivian Acquah and I'm the certified DEI consultant. I know, it has been a very long time since I've done the Humanize the Workplace, but you could have also seen me on other things, right? So I've been very busy with cooking back to our roots. For those who want to look back, Google me, search for cooking back to our roots via LinkedIn or via YouTube, and you'll see the four-part episode which I did about the Dutch history with high potentials of the Netherlands. But today I want to make sure that I'm having a good conversation about the men, right? And therefore, I'm having a conversation with two men. One is on the other side of the ocean, and the other one is near me. But let me introduce them one by one, right? So, today's conversation is about the role of male allies, and I'll start with Daniele Fiandaca, who is the founder of Token Man Consulting, an IND or inclusion and diversity consultancy, which specializes in engaging men in the inclusion and diversity strategy and inspiring them to become change makers. And then I have André Darmanin, who is a global inclusion strategist, founder of CEO of Urban Equity Consulting Services, and host of the Global Conversations webcast. So a little side note though for the people that know me. So the reason why I brought both of them, Andre recently interviewed me for his podcast, so therefore I see him in a way being activating his allyship for me as well. But then again, Daniele, a while ago he reached out to me. No, not him reaching out to me, but the company he had in mind reached out to me and asked me if I could do a workshop with them, a training with them. They highlighted the both of us recently in their post, and we were talking about the conversation. Okay, where are the men? What are they doing? Where are they standing? And that led to this conversation of having this talk today. So welcome, Daniele and Andre. Let's start with you, Daniele. Why do we need to humanize the workplace? Don't
Uh,
we know that already in 2023 or almost going to 2024?
I think we forget. I think we forget. I mean, I used to work in marketing, and I always remember
Mm-hmm.
everyone talked about the consumer, and I hated
Yeah.
it. I worked within the strategy, and I just tried to get rid of the word consumer and actually call people human beings. I think we so often put monikers on people, and if we look at things like equity, inclusion, diversity, we have created a space where we've named people, we've created groups of people, and actually what
Mm-hmm.
we need to do is actually start going back to recognizing that we're all human beings. So you're
Yeah.
talking about being allies. It's really interesting. I do a lot of allyship work, but if you look at the traditional definition of allyship, it is supporting historically marginalized groups. I
Yeah.
much prefer talking about allyship being supporting people, supporting everyone, but also
Yeah.
within that, and I love Andre's got it in the name of his consultancy, but within that, just getting them to understand what equity is. So,
Yeah.
equity is not giving support to one group and not giving support to another group. Equity is just recognizing that some groups need more support than others. What
Mm-hmm.
I think what I think the DEI industry has got wrong, and I've been in it for 6 years, so I'm included within that. What it's got wrong is it's assumed people like me, and let's be really clear, if you type the word privilege into Google Images, you will get someone like me. I am extremely
Mm-hmm.
privileged. But what
Mm-hmm.
people assume is someone like me who looks like me, is experienced me, does not need support. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that just could not be further from the truth, especially when we talk about the need for people to change, so they can become more inclusive managers, leaders, and human beings.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I also want to demystify. I normally use, when you Google equity versus equality, there is this image that there with bicycles, right? Or bicycles. The Netherlands is known for our bicycles. I mean, when you stand outside and walk through Amsterdam, you'll be hit by a bicycle, for sort of say. And one of the things that I always mention is, given the state that I am, a lot of people don't know that I'm very tall. So I'm a very tall woman, and I'm also dealing with a temporary disability right now. If you would put me on a stand-up bike and provide that to everybody, you are already excluding me at the get-go. But then again, if you would provide me a bike that is specialized given the condition that I'm in, but also my length, my height, then I will be able to join the party. Then I will be able to join you in the goal that we are. And sometimes, oftentimes, equity is seen as equality, whereas equality, you're providing everybody the same bike, and equity is looking into what kind of bike you need. So asking that question ahead of time so that you can be able to support people. So thank you, Daniele. And Andre, what is your answer for humanizing the workplace? What is needed? What ingredient do we need?
Well, I mean, Daniele made some great points in terms of, equity, inclusion, and privilege and
Mm.
whatnot. I want to add a couple of things in terms of promoting empathy here.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
are naturally selfish human beings, and sometimes, we think for ourselves and whatnot. But, you know, to humanize the workplace itself, we need to encourage that empathy and have a mutual understanding amongst each other as employees, as society, and whatnot, which would then, encourage more of a cooperative and productive work atmosphere. And I also
Yeah.
want to talk about something that I pride myself on a lot, which is cultural intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who don't know what cultural intelligence is, it's, we talk so much about cultural empathy, cultural competency, and whatnot, but it goes a little bit further because cultural intelligence is an aspect of inclusive leadership. And
Mm-hmm.
a humanized workforce fostering that cultural intelligence per se, it actually encourages people to fully understand individuals' cultures, the respect, the cultural diversity of themselves, and also, having that effective communication amongst each other. Because, especially
Mm-hmm.
given the fact that we are in a interconnected world, as well as given the fact that we have immigration, migration, refugee inclusion. We have all of those factors involved, and we're focused so much on the what it is in terms of the Western world. How do they
Yes,
envision the
exactly.
workplace themselves? How do we incorporate other people who are coming to our countries instead of secluding them or isolating them? How do we include them into the workplace and have a full understanding as to who they are as individuals and how they can contribute to the workplace instead of soloing them out or having them disengaged in the workplace? Because at the end of the day, what happens? Everyone just leaves to go to an organization that actually accepts them for who they are. And that's exactly what
Mm-hmm.
Daniela said when it comes to bringing your whole self to work. Um,
Yeah.
and I guess the last thing as we talk about, allyship here, one of the things is that we need to have, collective partnerships, and those partnerships meaning that male allies can collaborate with female colleagues, or I don't even want to just talk about it as a gender perspective, but we need to talk about it from,
Mm-hmm.
let's distance ourselves from gender stereotypes, but also, we need to have male colleagues support and create that allyship to get rid of those gender disparities in the advocacy
Mm-hmm.
and actually advocate for those in the workplace who are experiencing those inequities that you spoke of earlier. So those are a
Yeah.
few things that I think that we need to have on top of what Daniela said.
And Andre, just
When
picking up on
you
your, do you mind?
mm-hmm.
Can I just pick up on what
Yeah,
Andre
yeah,
said? So
definitely.
I loved,
Yeah.
so it's my favorite 3 words I learned last month, and I've just done a LinkedIn post with it, I think last week, which is sustainable
Mm-hmm.
competitive advantage. And
Mm.
and it's
Yeah.
actually it's in here as Ali's book on Mount Allies. And I just think it's so beautiful because basically what she's brought it, what she's really taken out of it is those men that really do lean in. What they'll find
Mm-hmm.
is they'll find that more women want to work with them, and
Yeah.
actually they'll get this amazing sustainable sustainable collaborative advantage. And actually, we did a report last year which you can find on the Tokenman website. It's tokenman.org. There's quite a few reports on there. But we did a men leaning in piece of research. So we actually went to some of the men. It was over 100 men who have been actively leaning in, and they told us, what were their barriers, what motivated them, but also what was the consequence of leaning in. And my favorite response was, people talk to me more.
Mm,
And I
yeah.
think it really fit with what you were saying, Andre, is that people will seek out those people who are leaning in, being those allies, and really see that support.
I also wanted to thank you, Daniele. I also wanted to highlight, because you mentioned a few of my favorite words, and that is empathy. I love it when people, talk about empathy. But then again, you mentioned cultural intelligence, where the moment that you mentioned that, a situation or an example came into mind where a person who has Indian roots, who traveled to Europe and was working for a company, an international company, where they invited him for the Christmas event, right? For all these years that they were doing these Christmas event, nobody thought about asking him, what are your food preferences? I always have to lean into food. You have to know that by now. I always do that. They never asked him. So his food preference was halal. The fact that they never asked him, but then invited him for the Christmas celebration and didn't have halal food, meaning he could not even participate. That's a way for you to cause exclusion without asking. So after 3 years, they made it possible. He eventually said something, but after 3 years, they made it possible to ask more people about their food preferences. Like now they are serving vegan, vegetarian, but also halal, because of the fact that more and more companies are becoming more culture aware. And one of the ways that you can break the cultural intelligence iceberg is asking people about their foods. What do you love? What do you not love? What are your customs in your country, right? Can we do a potluck in the workplace forever? So that's just my 2 cents, but I want to dive into, what does it mean to be a male ally in the workplace? And I'll start with you, Andre.
Well, there's a lot of perspectives here when it comes to male
Mm-hmm.
allyship in the workplace. One thing is, being an active listener.
Mm,
We talk about this incessantly, if you will, and as part of a leadership skill, if you will, or a leadership attribute, in the sense that it validates, the perspectives of colleagues, particularly those who are from the underrepresented and marginalized groups. And also, one of the things that we don't really talk about so much are those, the introverts versus extroverts, right?
mm, yeah.
Some people say that, introverts are ones who are just too quiet, they don't want to participate, and they, so there's that aspect as one part of it, is as being, they're probably the best active listeners, right? Because they are the ones who sit back and take everything in
Mm-hmm.
before they
Yeah.
respond. And whereas, the negative side for most extroverts is that, boom, they'll jump right in and they'll speak their mind and
Yeah.
whatnot. So and then of course there's the confidence factor that involves. So that's one thing about active listening. The second thing,
Yeah.
I want to talk about is, as being a male ally, we can be role models. And yes, we've
Mm,
talked about role models as being ones who are male role models. You look at the leadership circle, if you will. Majority of leadership people that write the books are white, male, cisgender people. That's starting to change,
I noticed
right?
that
In
as
terms of
well.
who's
I
been
noticed
writing
that as
books, you
well.
have the
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's starting to change. Like I can give a shout out to my colleague Jenny Vasquez Newsom, who I had on my webcast a while back. Who's got untapped leadership. She's someone who's done that. There's a few American. There's Obi James in the UK. So
Mm-hmm.
there are people who are from the racialized and marginalized communities together for that intersectional perspective. And then of course we can advocate for diverse representation, right? Because look,
Mm-hmm.
I'm mixed heritage. Daniele he's Italian, he's British, but still has the privilege, if you will, right? As he mentioned
Mhm.
earlier. But then how do we advocate for that as people who are able-bodied, and who are of different cultures, right? How do we advocate for them in the
Mhm.
space? And that becomes, not only as mentors, but also in the workplace. And I think we'll probably touch on it at some point between Danielle and myself about sponsoring people. And sponsoring, for those who
Yeah.
don't know, are basically, we talk about the people who are not in the room that we advocate for in terms of promotion, in terms of work opportunities, etc. So yeah, so I mean, those are some opportunities. Daniela will probably have a whole slew of other ones as well that'll add to that, as being that male ally, if you will.
I want to highlight one thing because since it's the year end, right? And most of the time the end year reviews come by. So for those of you who are listening or watching, make sure that you investigate, research more about sponsorship, but also make sure that you learn more about what you can do when people are talking about you, about your promotion, while you are not in the room. So I hope that it's fixable. And if not, take it away for 2024, what you can do differently to connect with people, but also amplify your visibility or amplify your network so that people know about you who are deciding about your promotion, who are deciding about your money as well. Daniele.
So where to start? There's so much I can say about allyship. So I think the first thing I understand, and obviously building on what Andre said, so 100%
Mhm,
agree with the things that Andre picked up. I think for me, the key for me is I do a lot of inclusive leadership work. So when we talked about empathy, I mean my empathy 100%. Listen, I think the missing ingredient really more than anything else is vulnerability. I still 100% believe in vulnerability. If you haven't come across the work that Christopher Veal does, I think Christopher Veal's fantastic. He also has a fantastic podcast. Um, I think for me, so if I look at that inclusive leadership and what do we do at inclusive leadership level, what we are trying to do is we're trying to take people beyond allyship through to becoming agents of change. And actually, I think understanding what active allyship looks like is really important. So I hear some people saying or thinking that mentorship is allyship. It's not. Mentorship is just
mhm,
the basic you should be doing as a leader, right? And actually,
mhm,
what you'll find is leaders who mentor lots of people, and certainly younger people, will learn as much from those people as they will give down. Sponsorship, we're starting to move a bit more into allyship. But ultimately, I will say the same thing, always say the same thing, is you're only a true ally if you're changing the system, because it is the
mm,
system that is creating exclusion. It's not necessarily, and part of that system is human behaviors, 100%. But actually, it's the system that's actually creating the exclusion. And going back to who I am. I wrote, and listen, I make no money from writing a book. If you want to go rich, don't do it from writing a book. I will get less than a I will get less than a cent to anyone that buys this, but I'm not promoting it for that reason. I'm just saying I wrote
mhm,
a book 6 years ago called Creative Superpowers with three peers, and those superpowers, well, the superpower that I am and what I really believe in is hacking. And what the whole point of hacking is to understand that we operate in this really complex system. And the way that we change systems, we have to break them down into lots and lots and lots and lots of small parts. And once you've broken them down into smaller parts, you can then take each of those parts and you can actually start fixing them. You can start saying, okay, this is broken here. What can we do to change? And the reason I bring this up, because I think you talked, Vivian, you talked about promotion. I'll just get a very quick story about Google, because I do think they have a hacker culture. They're a tech
mhm,
business. You'd expect them to have hacker culture. But what was really interesting, going back to, and I interviewed Kevin Mathers on International Women's Day about 6 years ago, and that was quite a 6 years ago. That was quite forward thinking to get a man to interview a man on International Women's Day.
mhm,
That was quite out there but that was led by the Women's Network, because they understood the need for actually allyship, and they wanted Kevin to talk about his story so that more men could be inspired by that story. But what he talked about was about, I think it was about 5 years ago, Google tried, what they found is there weren't enough women putting themselves forward for promotion. So they said to all the managers, tell your female colleagues in your team who you think should be deserve to be promoted, tell them to put themselves forward.
Mm-hmm.
No change. Nothing
Yeah.
changed. So a year later, they're hackers. They tried something else, and they just said to all the managers, anyone you think that should be put this up promotion, in the 3 months leading up to promotion, tell them what a great job they're doing, and keep on telling them, keep on telling them, keep on telling them, keep on telling them. And guess what? Loads more women put themselves forward.
Mm-hmm.
So really understanding that dynamic and actually understanding what is it that actually helps and shifts the system and breaks the system, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, but also I'm thinking of two things, right? Because when men apply to a vacancy, they see 3 things out of the 10 things that is qualified, they apply. For the predominantly women, for the women part, they see 10 things and they see that they fit 5 things and they don't apply. I recognize this with myself. I started to change this, but then again, we have to change the narrative as well, because it's not only upon the women who see themselves like that, but it's also upon the other side of the table, the decision makers, who also see that, well, you're lacking 5 of the 10 skills. So what are you going to do about that? And on the other hand, while you were talking, my mind was going to Hidden Figures. There is this part within the movie, Hidden Figures. Google it. There is this part in the movie where Kevin Costner is standing up for Taraji, asking Taraji about, why is it that you're taking a half-hour toilet break or restroom break? And she mentioned that she has to go 30 minutes here, 30 minutes to another restroom. Why? Because it's a restroom for colored people. All of a sudden, instead of Kevin looking at her, looking at the other people, he started dismantling all the signs, making an effort, saying that everybody can use this restroom and everybody can use the coffee from now on. If you want to look out, please Google that part, Hidden Parts, Taraji and Kevin Costner, where you see the restrooms, then you will understand why it's important that we need leaders, allies to break the system, right? That's what you were talking about. Breaking the system is very
I
important.
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that film, and I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be using it in my workshops going forward. So thank you, Vivian. This is amazing.
Same here.
You're
Same here.
welcome. You're welcome.
And
You're welcome. Yeah.
and I want to tap into what Daniela said, and about active allyship. And I want to dial it back a little
Or
bit,
authentic
because
allyship, right? Sometimes it's called authentic as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
authentic allyship. But then we have what we've known in everything being performative, right? People will supposedly stand up for women, supposedly stand up for racialized and marginalized people. They'll join
Only
groups
in March.
just for the sake that they put their name in. It's
Yeah.
Exactly. Only in March, right? For internet,
Yeah.
or for Black History Month, for International Women's Day, for all of that. They'll put in their names for whatever reason. And yet, will they show up the day after? Will they show up the month after to see the gender biases that exist within their organizations, within their systems, their structures, etc.? And chances are, and I want to even go back to me being formerly in the urban planning space, where it's predominantly engineers, predominantly males. And when I was working in transportation, one of the things that we would come across is safety concerns, right, for women, especially at night, right? And there were still those issues of, how do you we don't understand why women are feeling that way, sitting at a bus stop in the middle of the night when there's nobody around. There's safety concerns. And I know that a lot of agencies still do that, but at the same time, it's like, you need to put yourself in those shoes and not just say, yes, I stand up for women, right? At the end of the day, we need to show up. And that's what Daniela has also mentioned. I echo what he said. I echo what your references with the movie, all of that in general. So we have to show up, and we have to be active allies in supporting women in the workplace.
Well, the thing that I hear.
I just wanted to add this comment from Dr. Katz here, and then I'll pass it on to you, Daniele. So Katchir I'm hoping that I'm pronouncing your name right, Dr. Kat, and otherwise let me know. A sponsor may be supporting one individual despite their background, one of the good ones, rather than addressing the opposition to promotion of people of that gender, race, etc., changing the system. And Dr. Kat also shared the link within LinkedIn of Hidden Figures. Yes, Daniele.
Yeah, so I was gonna say I 100% agree with that. I think if you're a true ally, you're doing more than just sponsoring, right? Sponsorship is
Yeah.
just one activity within that. I
Mhm.
think it is a more active bit because you are putting some of yourself on top. The only thing I was going to say to Andre is we did a piece of research last year, which was the things that people say this year for International Women's Day, and it was no surprise that one of the things that it was women talking about the language people still use in the workplace that gets in the way of gender equity, and it was no
Mhm.
surprise that in that top 10 came, of course I support gender equity. I have a daughter. Like,
Yes.
men haven't had daughters for centuries. It's like having a daughter does not make you a supporter of gender equity. And unfortunately, I will say this, unfortunately, it breaks my heart to say I'm not a father, but it does. But I am
Mhm.
I am an uncle. I am a godfather um, to a beautiful godchild. But it breaks my heart to see how many fathers aren't leaning into this, that how many
Yeah.
fathers aren't changing the system to create workplaces that are truly inclusive,
Yeah.
equitable, and diverse. So, yes.
So I do
And I want to
agree
add
with
just
you. For some of you,
yeah.
some of you already know that I use VR, virtual reality, to help others to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. And oftentimes, when I'm providing these opportunities, these experiences for men, they often say, like, do women really encounter these challenges? And I'm just like, this is just one tiny bit that you've noticed. And yes, we do too often, too many times. And even when men have 3 daughters or 4 daughters, they still are in the disbelief of, does this really happen in the workplace? Unfortunately, yes. If you look at Me Too, if you look at other things that are happening in the workplace, right? People are being overlooked, women are being skipped during meetings, or ideas are being hijacked. And I would like to challenge the men to stand up and speak up about it as well. Andre.
I just wanted to add one last thing, and it just sparked,
Hmm.
this whole conversation, especially considering Hidden Figures. One of the things that has come to
Yeah.
mind, especially given the fact that we are all getting older, we all have older
No.
women in our lives. Okay, but at the end of the day, one of the conversations that is starting to happen is about menopause. And
Yeah.
that is a
Yeah.
critical conversation that we need to fully understand what a woman goes through, especially those who are, who are Gen X like myself. And I'm not going
Yeah.
to assume Daniela, but those who are Gen X people, right? We fully understand what goes on with women in terms of that and the challenges that they go through. So even it's not necessarily equivalent to the situation, but it's still a situation in the sense of what women go through, what challenges women
Hmm.
go through, especially if going through such a life-changing event such as menopause.
I would love to challenge men to walk, through the different phases that women walk through, right? The moment that you are becoming a woman, the first time that you are dealing with the monthly things, women are being teased in the workplace for that, as in, oh, it's that time of the month. That's why you are cranky, right? We laugh about it, but these are the things that women are facing. And then again, we're dealing again with being penalized the moment that we become pregnant or the moment that we become moms. Then all of a sudden we are not equipped to do the same job. We do it in a different way, but we still do it we still are able to do our job. And then on top of that, we're going into a different phase where we are menopausing, and then there's also a lot of BS. So I wish in the future, hopefully in the future, there will be something where men can really experience what women go through, because there's a lot that we go through and still have to deal with the BS that is happening in the workplace just because we are women.
Well, I went to my first menopause workshop about 3.5 years ago, and the woman running it came up to me and said,
Hmm.
"Thank you so much for coming." And I was like, why wouldn't I come? My mum, my
Mhm.
wife is going through the premenopause. Why
Yeah.
wouldn't I come and understand what she's going through? Because actually, ultimately, whatever she's going through, I need to be there to support her. So
Exactly.
for me, it's a lack of, men, generally, human beings are good. Let's be really clear. Human beings are good.
Yeah.
They lack knowledge. And actually, a lot of the issue we have is ignorance of the challenges that people face. And I think for me, a lot of the
Mhm.
work I'm trying to do is not only trying to fill that gap of knowledge, but also the prioritization. So understanding. So if I'm going to take a workplace example. We know that men do not prioritize taking time off as soon as their
Mhm.
kid is born. Okay.
Yeah.
I can tell you now, if they could go forward to their future self when they're sitting on their deathbed and they know what they know then, they would all be
Yeah.
taking the time off, right? That
Mm.
is,
Sure.
the stats all tell you it is
Mhm.
the impact of a father spending time in that first year is
Mhm.
significant. The impact of them being in their job, it really, maybe they'll get,
But
you know,
Daniele,
I,
there are countries and rules and procedures that are supporting the men to do that. In the Netherlands, we have such a procedure, but then again, men are being penalized if they take the time off. They're being penalized by their male co-workers about taking the time off to take care of their child. Why are you? Are you the wife all of a sudden, or are you somebody else? Right? So it's a do if you do, you're doomed if you don't, and you're doomed if you do
Yeah, well, I'm not
situation.
sure. I'm not sure that's true though, because Elliot Ray, I had Elliot Ray on my panel the other day, and I'm sorry, I'm going to give a call
Hmm.
out to Lee Chambers. And when we talk about
Yeah.
the menopause, do follow
Hmm.
Lee Chambers. Lee Chambers, as a man, has
Hmm.
done some fantastic work on that side.
Yeah.
But also Elliot Ray, when it comes to fathers, Elliot just said, someone said, "What do you say to the man who's scared of taking that time off and it negatively impacting the
Mm.
career?"
Yeah.
His answer
Yeah.
was, "Well, maybe it will." But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe you don't need that
Hmm.
extra stress that you're going
Yeah.
to get from that promotion. Maybe that 6 to 12 months is not going to have a big impact. And he just said, just think about, there's an amazing stat, which is when a kid has reached 18, a parent on average has spent 93% of the time with that child.
Yeah.
So from 18 onwards, they've only got 3% left. Could you imagine if you've wasted all that 97%, how little time you've got left with that child? And so for me, I loved what Elliot said. Elliot said, and this comes down to the prioritization. What's more important for you, to get that promotion 6 to 12 months earlier, or to actually have a bond with your child that will make a difference for the rest of their lives? And
Hmm.
that's
Yeah.
how we have to reframe the question. And actually,
Hmm.
and that's what we have to do as an individual. Don't get me wrong. At a corporate level, we need to get the corporates to give the shared parental leave. Yeah, we have to push on that
Yeah.
side. At an individual
And
level, we
also on
just
the countryside, there needs to also,
100%. Yeah,
as
yeah.
in the rules and regulation, there also need to be supportive for men to take a time off as well. Yeah. You were saying, sorry, I was interrupting you. But I'm dealing with, I have to go to the final question or two final question, and that is the challenges. Because one of the challenges that men face with becoming a male ally, especially towards the other gender, they fear for any other ism, or they fear for being called out, or they fear for being whatever. How can they overcome these obstacles? Let me start with you, Andre.
I think we touched upon a lot of it that is in the
Hmm.
previous comment. I mean, we talk about, like you just said, we talked about pushback, right?
Hmm.
There's going to be people who are resistant to that change within an organization. They're going to be ignorant of that change. Those who increase their awareness, their education, of the circumstances that we just mentioned about menopause, about being the life cycle of a woman,
Hmm.
fully understand that, right? How does that play out in policies and programs that exist? The example that I made with transportation, and it goes back to the situation of active listening, about engaging in that dialogue, and talking about the benefits of equity and inclusion, and also that sense of belonging of why women should be in the same room as a man and be accepted for their talents.
Yeah.
And the one thing is that if we don't do it, men become complicit of that privilege, right?
Yeah.
It's their agency is not there. They don't understand the benefits of equity inclusion when they're complicit to the system that continues to exist and perpetuates consistently throughout their work lives, etc. If something it doesn't, if
Mhm.
they don't stand
Mhm.
up for that change, like what Danielle said, if they don't stand up for that change, it's going to continue to harbor, continue to manifest. But the one thing too is that just like there's an imposter syndrome for women in these spaces,
Mhm.
there's an imposter
Yeah.
syndrome for men too. And the rationale is that not only is there fear to change, but there are also those fears of missteps, especially when you're in
Yeah.
a bureaucratic system, for example, right? It's all about the chain of command. You don't want to piss off your boss because you'll be chastised, or you'll be demoted, or you won't get the promotion, etc. It's the fact that at the end of the day is, you know you learn if you make mistakes, right? Because if you
Mhm.
don't learn from those mistakes, what are you going to do within your careers? And
Yeah.
and how do you change with those times is you continuously learn, right? As we've been talking about, learning about women in the workplace and their life cycle, like I said earlier, is having that humility to say that, hey, I made a mistake, I'll learn from my mistake, and I will do better, right? And
Yeah.
as well as, the one last thing is, if you have those missteps, learn to just apologize for those mistakes as well, because there's no harm in apologizing, right? And then
A sincere
that'll
apology
eventually help
form.
you overcome the challenges. Sorry, yes, a sincere
Sincere
apology, exactly,
apology.
right? It's not, as we talked about earlier, is about the
Mhm.
performative nature of those apologies, right?
Mhm.
We talked about it,
Yeah.
whether it's even if it's not just, between male and female, or gender biases or gender stereotypes. It's even within racial conversations, right? It's all aspects
Mhm.
of equity and inclusion. And yeah, and you need to have that authentic apology, so that you know that you have that willingness to change and willingness to learn.
Thank you, Andre. Daniele.
I think me and Andre were secretly separated at birth, because he talked about the is because I've produced a number of books, but one of them is called The Best Piece of Advice Ever, and the best piece of advice I had in my book was it's better to be wrong and interesting than right and boring, because I've learned
Mm.
so much more from being wrong. I think the problem that we've
Mhm.
created, and it is the DEI, we've created an environment where actually most men, and I work with senior men. I've got a token man brain trust, C-suite men, and I work at every level with men. They are all say the same thing. They are shit scared to say anything. Okay,
Yeah.
so what we have to
Yeah.
do there's a number of ways that we need to do that. So firstly, I work with businesses to create brave spaces. So they are rooms and spaces that are just for people who identify as men. And so those men can make those mistakes. We also need to create an environment where other people are more forgiving, and actually my experience, believe I've worked in the DEI space. Actually, my experience has been amazing. I've made mistakes. Of course, I've made mistakes over 6 years, but because I'm leaning in with everything, people will be forgiving and they will feed back to you. So actually, just being able to tell those stories, I think, is really important. But
Mhm.
and I said this to a CEO today. I'm doing a talk for them on Thursday, and he said, "Please, please, can you say this to my team?" The reality is we're going through a significant moment of change.
Mhm.
When change happens, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
people sitting there going, I don't like this change. This change is not working for me. I'm not engaging. Okay. I'm worried about the negative impact it's going to have on me. If change happens, you don't move without change. You are right to be worried, because you will become irrelevant. Okay, so
Yeah. Yeah.
when change happens, there's only one thing you can do if you want to stay relevant and actually, still have a good career and move forward. You have to lean in. And that leaning
Yeah.
in is means that you do have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. You do need to understand what support you need around you. Here at on our allies panel, which is still alive actually on Vimeo, if you have a look at the Token Man Vimeo, is here at Ally talked about the need for allies to also have their own allies, because actually the work we're asking people to do is not always easy, and we have to talk about that, because if we don't talk about that and people hit a roadblock, they just jump back out. And so what we
Mm-hmm.
all need, so I have people around me when I hit a stumbling block, is I know I can go to someone and go, here, this is what I'm facing. And actually, they can give me that empathy. They can give me that support that I need at that moment of time. But I think the key thing for me is, if you want to be a good manager, a good leader, or a good human being, you have to be inclusive. Simple
Yeah.
as that. The world has changed. You have to be inclusive, which means you have to be culture intelligent. You need to be empathetic. You need to be vulnerable. You need to be collaborative. Okay. If you've got gaps in those skills, start getting yourself skilled up. But whatever you do, you have to be leaning in. Otherwise, you will find yourself irrelevant.
Yeah. When you were talking, Daniele, I was thinking about, because leadership is a lonely business. A lot of leaders have shared with me that they find it lonely, and they don't see that the challenges that they face as in leading, everybody is looking up towards them. And every time that they make a mistake, they feel like the mistake is much bigger. But as a leader, you should have somebody else to coach you, to guide you, to be that mirror, so that you can make a mistake in front of me. I'm okay with you making a mistake, as long as you are having the intention to create a better impact, as long as you have the intention to do better. Like Maya Angelou's quote, right? When you know better, you do better. And that's such an important thing, that leaders think that they should hire just somebody who is a coach. I'm not dismissing any coaches. Just hire somebody who is a coach, but who doesn't have the aspects of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And also, as a leader, or for leaders, challenge yourself. If you're dealing with a racial, or if you're dealing with a gender, or if you're dealing with a disability challenge, and you're hiring somebody who doesn't have any expertise in that, I'm not dismissing people, but I do want to put things out there, like there are different people for different challenges. So challenge yourself to engage with different people, seek for help, ask experts for help, so that you are better able to lead the different people that your talent has already, your company has already.
Yeah, and
I
I
see
fully
Andre
agree with you on
nodding.
that, Vivian. I
Hmm.
yeah, and there's different levels of a leadership journey.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
have your mentorship, you have your sponsorship, and I'm going to echo what you said, Vivian, and I know that I'm going to plug my webcast conversation that you and I had, right, about the coaching side of things, and that
Yeah.
is just as important. And people, there's obviously going to be people, especially men, who are resistant to change, and like I said earlier, having that fear of change. And we live, as Daniela
Hmm.
said, we live in, not to use that that catchphrase, or the system or whatever, of we need to be agile. And how do we become agile?
Yeah.
Is that we learn with the systems, and we have those supports in there, because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
if we don't have those supports throughout our network, our coaches, our mentors, are those who speak in the rooms that we're not in, and if we don't show up, then like Daniela said, at the end of the day, we'll become irrelevant, right? So yeah, definitely
Well,
we need to have those
I
those support systems.
I think for those who haven't seen Morgan Freeman's recent Netflix show, or a series about, life on Earth, that's how I look upon traditional leadership, because eventually dinosaurs extinct, right? That's how I look on traditional leadership, where amazing show on Netflix with Morgan Freeman talking about the history of dinosaurs, but also the history of Earth. And that's how I see traditional leadership dying, because there are different generations now that are standing up, walking away sooner than later. And you, as a leader, as an organization, you might be dealing with a challenge of dealing with a higher turnover than you would expect it. So look at this conversation, listen back to this conversation, watch this conversation, and have a conversation in the workplace about when you're ready in 2024, when you're ready to challenge yourself and to become the leader we all know that you can be, courageous leader, inclusive leader, new leader, innovative leader, instead of being a traditional leader. That's what I want you to walk away from. And I assume Daniele and Andre as well. So final question. What's your wish for 2030 to humanize the workplace and when it comes to the role of male allies? And Daniele.
I just wish the DEI industry would recognize the need to engage men more. It's so frustrating because I know, Vivian, we first spoke. I spoke at your thing about 4 years ago. It still isn't recognizing the need to engage men, and you know, if I take the UK, and the figures aren't better, it looks at the Ipsos study, you can see each of your markets. But in the UK, we now got to a place where 53% of men think gender equality has gone too far and discriminate against men. And when you put that in, so when we're going to workplaces, not only are we not seeing, we're seeing 53% not leaning in, they also think it's the inclusion, equity, and diversity is the enemy, right? And we've got to understand why we've got to that place. And partly we've got to that place because we haven't engaged the men meaningfully. So, you know, I've got a framework that I work with all clients, which is support men, inspire men, and then you can recruit men. And men are going to be in different parts of the journey. But we can't say that inclusion is for everyone and then just not include men. And again, let's be really clear here. We do companies do include men through the intersectionality. But actually, what I'm talking about is, unfortunately, and certainly in the UK and many markets, I'm talking about the white heterosexual men who are still in those leadership positions and coming through. I am also talking about actually the white working class men who actually social mobility isn't that high on the agenda when it comes to DEI. So the reality is we have to start. I want to see next year us recognizing that the only way we create change is by involving everyone. And that isn't just saying, men, this is your fault, fix it, come over here. And we recognize that actually we have to take those men on a journey. And part of that journey is giving them support.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Daniele. Andre.
You know, when Daniela had said that, you know, everything that he had mentioned or I had mentioned he wanted to mention, or right now it's the reverse, because it's just, he's taking everything that I want to say, especially, you know, okay, so first of all, let's, you know, in this North American market, there is, although gender bias exists, there's also the racial conversation, and that same conversation is, oh, we talk so much about Black folks, we talk so much about racial minorities, or, you know, and whatnot. So the same types of conversations, although one is race on our side of the world, genders on this side of the world, or on your side of the world, those conversations, and, you know, we've talked so much about this DEI backlash and whatnot, and these are, and, you know, these are things that we've started to listen to, and wrongly so, and the DEI profession has not caught up to that. And secondly, I'm going to echo what Daniela said, especially considering the social mobility conversation. EDI professionals do not entertain those conversations. And it goes back to the fact that they still don't know what social mobility and class means, right? And that's, and, you know, and it affects women that much more, right? So these are the types of conversations we need to have in our workplace, and for the future of, let's bring in that conversation. Because look, now that we're going through, you know, whether we want to call it a recession or not, as it is right now, women are that much more affected by that, right? In, you know, whether it's in the household, whether it's at the workplace, these are things we need to recognize, and we need to understand that class and social mobility are just as important for men as it is for women, and women are have a multiplier effect to them. You know, and as well as, you know, the one thing, and I, you know, to have this conversation of what I'd like to see besides what Daniela said, and what I've 150% agree with him on, is the fact that we are, you know, that we learn to be human. We need to be humans again. We need to show that everyone's voice is heard, and make that male allies are not just an exception but part of the norm, and that everyone understands and fulfills themselves as an individual. And of course, going back to my initial part of it, is that as our workplaces are more globalized, that we become more cognizant of the cultural differences that exist within our society, and how they have an impact on our policies, on our programs, and and our relationships as a whole. So all of that,
Yes,
that's what
I
I hope
agree.
to see in the future.
Thank you both so much. I mean, I could have gone hours and hours and hours, because indeed the conversation, I'm also at fault in not engaging in so many conversations with men on Humanize the Workplace, but behind the scenes I am, whereas we need to make space for all. It's not only, focusing on one aspect of the diversity lens or that aspect of the diversity lens. We need to focus on all. So for all the men who are watching, or for those who know men who need to watch this conversation, or need to listen to this conversation, share it with them as well, because this is a very valuable conversation. Thank you, Andre. Thank you, Daniele. And looking forward to our next time.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Have a great
Thank
afternoon or
you.
evening.
Take
Bye.
care.
Bye.
Bye.